morning. Thanks for joining us on Sunday, October the 5th, 2025. So, our main story today is the budget that is going to be presented to Parliament and to all Canadians on November the 4th. And it's already projecting a deficit higher than what we were expecting. And so, we're going into this budget already preconditioned that we're going to have a significant deficit projected in this budget. I'm not going to bore you with numbers. I'm not a numbers person. I'm just going to give you a quick general overview of what to expect, what to see. But more importantly, I want you to hear what the budget office, at least the person who's in charge, he's not an auditor like an auditor would be for all of the government, but he's just specifically a type auditor for the budget process within Parliament. And I want you to hear what he has to say because I think it is, concerning is the word I would use. So let's get started and dig into this story. I have a couple of articles here, one from the Global News, one from the Canadian Press, and one from the CBC regarding the budget set to GDP no longer falling. So basically our debt is going up. And investment crisis on the article from the Canadian Press, basically indicating that we have a shortage of companies and individuals that want to invest in our country just in a time when we need that third party investment to put together and implement our major projects for the turnaround in our economy and how we're going to do business moving forward. And then on the CBC, Prime Minister Carney will table his first budget on November 4th. He's probably wishing that he had tabled sort of a quote unquote preliminary budget back in April or May. Now he's going to drop this bombshell in Parliament, and it's definitely going to be interesting to see what is announced in that budget. So, like I said, it will be tabled on November the 4th. Parliamentary Budget Office projects that the deficit will be announced at $68.5 billion, up from the 51.7 billion last year. So it's a major increase year to year. Debt to GDP. So our debt and how much our economy is growing is no longer on a declining path. The debt expected to rise by 43%. That's almost 50%. That's very concerning. Government plans to cut operational spending and that by 7.5% in 2026 and 2027, and 10% 2027 to 2028, and 15% from 2028 to 2029. So 7.5, 10%, and 15%. Where those cuts are going to occur will be very interesting to see because obviously Prime Minister Carney is already committed to certain things like the military. So cuts have to be made within government programs, and that is where the problems are going to start to surface. Now, Prime Minister Carney has positioned this budget as being a choice between investment versus austerity. Carney signals a mix of austerity measures to reduce expenses, so cutting budgets and departments, maybe letting people, laying off people, or maybe early retirement packages, and national building investments, infrastructure, housing, and defense. So that's spending that needs to take place because he's already committed to some infrastructure. Housing, he's definitely committed to, and defense, he's already made an announcement on that. Now, the business leaders in Canada say that we're in an investment crisis, urging fiscal anchors and deficit reduction. That isn't happening. So again, a challenge to bring investors into Canada for those big projects will be a challenge. Now, there's been some talk about possible GST hike or higher taxes on top earners in Canada. Middle class tax cut remain in place, so they won't be touched. So look for some opportunity to bring in more revenue to offset the expenses that he will be allocating in that budget. The Conservatives, obviously they're attacking the Liberals over fiscal credibility and have concerns regarding watching what is actually being spent. And that is, let's face it, I'm not going to talk about more of this about in my final comments, but this budget, of all the budgets I've seen in at least my lifetime, this is a hot potato, and only because we are in a tariff war with the United trade war with the United States, and we are restructuring our economy. And this budget is going to be a hot item. It'll be talked about for all of November for sure. And remember, Prime Minister Carney is a minority government. The Liberals are a minority government. They need 3 votes from somebody to carry the budget across the floor and get it approved. So it'll be interesting to see how they position this and how they play it. And will definitely interesting to see what is going to be announced on November the 4th. So a couple of articles here that I picked up from the Economic Fiscal Look September 2025. And one of the individuals from the Parliamentary Budget Office that put this together is I have a press conference that I'm going to be playing for you, that he will speak more to this and give us an overview. He's also being interviewed by PTB, and the things that he's going to say, when I heard it, concerned me, and they ought to concern you. And then after that, I'll give you my final comments as to politically how this budget's going to play out. But as you can see on the top left, 51 billion to 68 increase to 2025. Down in the lower left, federal debt to GDP ratio projected to increase 41.7% in 2024 and 2025, rising above 43% over the medium term. Compared to our March outlook, the federal debt to GDP ratio is 4.5%. So this is a major change. Top right projects the budgetary deficit, projects the budgetary deficit to increase sharply from 51 billion, 1.7% of GDP in 2024 to 2025 to 68 billion. Again, I don't want to inundate you guys with numbers. I think it's the big picture that we need to see. And let's take a look at the press conference. So this gentleman, Jason Jux, is basically, he's an interim parliamentary budget officer. He is basically an auditor, but they specifically audit the government budgets and do financial analysis on this. So it's interesting to hear him. This was a parliamentary committee that he was reporting on as to what they've were looking at the budget. Obviously, you can't release information regarding the budget. That's left for November 4th by the Prime Minister because it could affect the economy and the marketplace. But then after that, he's doing an interview with CTV, and there's some questions posed to him, and it's very interesting in what he says. It did alarm me. I know I've been telling you that we are spending a lot of money on different things because we have to. We don't have a choice. But the economy did contract in the second quarter. It might contract in the third quarter, and we might be headed into a recession. Whatever it is, the outlook doesn't look good, and I don't see anything dramatically happening to change the projections that I'm seeing. So let's hear from Jason right now.
And we don't lightly use the word unsustainable, right? Unsustainable means you don't have the option of saying, maybe I'll wait a couple of years, I'll see how things go. It means if you don't change, this is done.
Joining me now for more is Jason Jakes. Hi, Mr. Jakes. Good to have you back here in studio. I appreciate you making the time.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation.
Our audience would just have heard a little snippet right now of what you told committee this week about the fiscal outlook that you presented. You said it's not a funny fiscal outlook. It's really serious. Why did you say that?
Well, this is in the report we clearly indicated that based upon the path we're currently on, by our estimates, it raises significant concerns with respect to the sustainability of federal finances.
What does that mean in layman's terms? I'm asking because we hear that word a lot from economists, particularly when we're talking about deficits or balanced budgets, what and what isn't sustainable. When you say that you have concerns about the sustainability of our financial picture here in this country, like what in layman's terms does that mean?
I think certainly from our perspective, we're at the precipice. So we haven't gone over the precipice. We're kind of looking out over the cliff at this point. And we're at a point where, based upon our numbers, things cannot continue as they are. And I think everybody knows that, right? So what we've done is we've taken what everybody's feeling in terms of the anxiety across the country at this point, positive economic growth that doesn't necessarily feel very good. And we've actually put numbers around it with respect to the federal government's deficits over the next 5 years. And for us, it's really important to set the table for parliamentarians so they know what to expect, so they have a better sense of the overall context within which they're going to be presented with Budget 2025.
So what's at stake at the precipice? Like, if you fall over the cliff, what's there? If you're able to go the other way, what's there?
Obviously, you don't want to go over the precipice. That's probably
like, what happens though if you do?
Nothing good. And nothing good. And I think for parliamentarians, and certainly I think all Canadians are very much aware of the challenging economic times that we're in, and the fact that we're going to have more challenging times as we go forward, both in terms of trying to manage the deficit. So there isn't a lot of fiscal space the government has to actually work with at this point. But I think also more broadly, looking at the restructuring of the Canadian economy. So something we've touched on as part of the committee hearings, and I think other people have highlighted, is this world order that we've had for the past 75 years is done. That both has geopolitical considerations around additional spending or increasing spending on the defense side, which is definitely a spending pressure. It also has immediate pressures in terms of the Canadian economy and definitely the attenuating or the diminishing of the linkages with the U.S. and our need to find other linkages outside the country. So in short, it means a lot of change within a relatively short period of time.
What does it mean for the near term or the more immediacy, though, as far as impacts on both the economy and what you're looking at, the fiscal outlook? And I ask because in response to some of your analysis, for example, the federal finance minister focused on, look, we're kind of in an emergency. I'm paraphrasing, but we're going to need to provide certain supports and ensure that our economy can withstand that. I sort of interpret that as, we will have to spend more than we would have liked to, let's say, because we have to address the imperative that this trade war with the United States has created and the sort of shock factor to our economy. How much wiggle room do they actually have to do that in your view?
It is a very narrow path. It's a very narrow path, and it's going to require both consideration of shifting spending within the federal government, in addition to reducing spending or potentially cutting programs in some areas, as well as potentially some consideration around increases in revenues. In order to make sure that the Canadian economy, Canada, is actually able to navigate that very narrow path.
So my final thoughts on the budget that's going to be presented on March the 4th is it's going to be very controversial. The Liberals have the challenge of trying to get 3 votes from the opposition somewhere to carry this budget. And it's a hot potato, and it has sort of like, try to imagine little minefield, like a minefield. And in the budget, there's mines in that field for each party. And I'll give it to you on each one. The Conservatives can't vote for it because they don't believe in spending more money. They've been complaining that the Liberals have been overspending since Trudeau. The NDP can't vote for it because there is job cuts, early retirement, reduction in budgets. Not that the NDP is a player in the parliament, but they can't be up front and promoting it or approving it. The Bloc, there's nothing there for Quebec, really. And they're not going to approve it. So they're all don't want to be the party that's out there approving this budget, which calls for major increases in spending and definitely some manner of new revenue coming into the government, i.e. taxes. So that is the problem. And more importantly, the Liberals are minority government. And if they don't get those 3 votes, that I don't think any party wants to trigger an election. I don't think anybody's ready for another election. But I think there's gonna be a big fight over this. And I think it's gonna stick to the Liberals. And it may be something that the public, along with nothing happening with the trade deal with the United States or any relief on these tariffs and our industries sort of slowly melting and we're losing jobs. The job market is over 7%. New adults, it's over 14% unemployment. So it's just bad news all around. And Prime Minister Carney needs some good news for Canadians. And this budget, I don't think that there's going to be good news in this budget. But anyhow, let me know your thoughts and comments. Remember on this particular subject regarding the budget and what you think. And don't forget, every week we break down the biggest headlines with no spin, no fluff, and definitely no agenda. Thanks for watching. Be safe, and we'll see you on the next one.